Okay, this is going to be the second part of the head modeling tutorial series. And in this one, you can see I've ended up at a place where I've got both sides of the head modeled and ears attached. So in this video, we're going to cover how to model the ear, then how to reattach it to the head, and then how to kind of duplicate this half of the head and stitch it back together so that we have a solid base that we can start to subdivide and add additional detail to. All right, so to get started, I'll just hide the head so that I can model the ear. All right, I don't think that I have interactive creation for my primitives turned on, so I'll just click the tube primitive and then start to position it in place. To get that going, I'll rotate in the Z 90 degrees, position it kind of over top of where the ear is, pull it back in space, and I'll be using the side view for most of this tutorial. And another thing to note is that I'll be leaving the ear mostly vertical up until the end, just because that'll make modeling and grabbing the points much easier than if I kind of turn it on its edge like that. Then it becomes much harder in this side view to manage all the different points that I'll be wanting to grab. Okay, so the next step is to kind of make it about as thick as what you think the ear itself would be, kind of along this area. So I think maybe a little bit thinner, and then that'll be good. Put that back in place. Scale it. Actually, before I scale it, I'm going to dial down the number of subdivision axes from 20 to 16. I don't think I need all 20 of those. Okay, so once I've done that, then I'll actually scale it up. Oh, actually, one more thing. In the polypipe, I'll make the thickness, yeah, about 0.3. Then once I have that in place, I'll scale it up and rotate it a little bit that way so that kind of the top, if you imagine the cylinder has kind of the four corners, this is the top of it and this is the bottom of it. I'll just try and align that with how the ear is set up so that I have my earlobe down here with this bottom edge. This is kind of halfway and this is at the top. All right, now that I have that in place, I want to delete kind of the inside faces of the ring, which is this. So once you got those highlighted, you can delete those. And then I need to create a gap in the cylinder. So I'll go ahead and highlight these three and delete those. Once I've got all that done, what I'm going to do, so the general plan is that we have this line. Most people's ears, I think, are shaped like mine, but basically you've got this line that follows up, around, down, and then you also have this inner one that goes in and around, and then you have this like little knobby part here. So the first set that I want to match is actually this line here. So to do that, I'm going to make my material the temporary, or the more transparent one. If you want to set up this with transparent material, that's great. If you want to use X-ray, you can do that too, as long as your project is set up right. All right, but once you're able to see through, it's much easier to line up the verts. So I'll put these down here, scale them. So this is my starting point. And then from here, just start to walk around and position these pairs of verts by doing drag selection over top of them, and that way it'll grab. So you can see when I do a drag selection like that, I'm grabbing all four verts. It's just a little bit easier to do it in the orthogonal views than it is in the perspective view, just because they're right on top of each other, because everything's straight up and down still right now. All right, grab those pairs, put them kind of in place. Even though the hair is covering, I'll just kind of imagine where that point is. Push that up into place. Give that a little bit of a better angle. You want the kind of the edges to go around in a more radial pattern, so you don't have these like diagonal type lines. You want them of pushing in towards all the same center point. Get that in place. This takes a little bit, but once you get these things in a general location, yeah, and I'll end this set actually, there we go. Where I want to stop is kind of right at the bottom of where this area is here. Okay, so once you've got that going, then the next step is to extrude this next line and then match those up and then eventually tie back into this thing here. So the edge that you want to grab to start the extrusion is actually this bottom two edges here. Once you have those selected, you can extrude out. And what we're going to be doing is matching the points around the edges here. So each extrusion is going to match up with the existing edge rings that we have set up. All right, so with that in mind, go ahead and match. Oh, and the bottom points you want to match up along this line that runs here. Okay, and you don't have to tie things in yet. Eventually what we're going to be doing is, welding that vert to that vert, but I'll leave them separate for now and a little bit apart just so that it's much easier to weld them. If they're right on top of each other, using the target weld tool can be a little bit annoying. All right, go like that. And once you got that going, you can switch back to edge, extrude, move it over, rotate it a little bit, switch to verts. So this part of the process is a little bit kind of tedious, but it should end up with a nice result. Extrude that around there, position that here. Okay, and come to think of it, I may just speed this part of the video along, just so that you're not sitting here watching me place individual vertexes, because that makes for some boring video. Okay, so at this point we've kind of matched back up with the end of our first extrusion, but we're going to continue this around this little knobbly part in the ear and then actually sew back into the geometry which is already here. And to get that going, I'll actually bump this vert over a little bit. All right, and then I might go back into speedy video mode just so that it goes a little bit quicker. All right, we've got these laid out, and looking at my ear, I actually realized that this edge needs to move up, and I'll need to divide this a couple times just so we can tie back into it. So do that, switch over to vertex mode, pop these verts up here, and then using the multi-cut tool, I'll go ahead and add in 2 more divisions and position these. Position these along this initial edge. And then here, what we're going to be doing is tying this to here, this to here, and this to here. So I'll actually use the perspective view to do that, just because it's a little bit tricky to know whether you're clicking the top or the bottom vertex in this side view. So using target weld, just go ahead and attach that to that, there, there, and there to there. All right, so now we have basically this thing running all the way around, and make a couple minor adjustments. Like that. Actually, pull this up like that. Don't want to cover up this hole. So do that. Add one more cut. Position this vertex so it can come back down. So we've got coming over this kind of lobe here. I've got a high point, a bottom point, and top point. Okay, so now the next step is starting to fill in some of these areas that are empty. To get going with that, I want to get this initial starting point a little bit more contoured to what an ear would actually look like. So grabbing only the top 2 points, I'll push them back so it creates kind of this tilted area, and then grab these bottom 2 ones, pull them forward a little bit. And then after I've done that, I'll select the 2 edges and bridge them. So now in the side view, you can see that things are still totally vertical, and to get that functioning a little bit more like an ear, now I'll grab all 4 of these points and shift it down so that the top kind of lines up with this edge here. And once I've done that, I'll start to grab a couple of the pairs along our initial extrusion and just make it so that it kind of has a more gentle slope to it. All right, so then it's kind of curving in and down. Cool. All right, so now that I've got that, what I'll do is create 2 regions in the ear by selecting this edge, and bridging them. And so now we have this empty gap, right? So once that's created, what we want to do is select all of those edges and extrude them down. Flatten them out. And then start to connect things so that we are not able to see through the ear. So if I connect that to that, I still have 4 sides there. And let's see, maybe I'll start to attach. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll grab this edge, bridge that, and then let's see, actually we'll do one more extrusion here, pull it down, switch over to vertexes, and then weld that one to that one, this one to that one. So now I have a 4-sided thing here. Then, let's see, this might be a little bit wonky, but we can relax it later. Do that one to that one, bridge, and then this edge to this edge, bridge that. Okay, so with that all closed up, it's all quads. What I can do is select some of the verts that look a little bit weird, maybe like that, and then use the edit mesh and then average. When you do that, it kind of spreads out, gives it a little bit more gentle transition between different parts. So now that that top area is filled in, we want to do that same process for most of the ear down here. So I'll grab this edge and this edge. No, don't want that edge. That edge. Actually, now that I'm looking at it, what I want to do is extrude and then scale in, because this is the area of the ear that's actually starting to go this way. So I'll extrude, scale in, flatten it, shift it over just a little bit, do another extrude, scale it in again. This time start to turn, because what we're going to end up with is kind of this channel that's going into the head. Extrude, do that again, rotate. So now we have this part of the ear that's kind of shooting in. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and run around and stitch all the points back together that I haven't done yet. All right, so here we have kind of a good base that you can start adding in extra edge rings and extra topology, and the ear should start to take better shape. One thing that may change between different models is I have earlobes that aren't connected to my head, as you can see here. If you do have earlobes that are connected to your head, then this bottom part may look a little bit different than mine, where you might need to slide these over and maybe even slide this one over too, so that it's attached to the head. But for now, I'm going to leave those there, and then target weld this to that. Oh, actually, no, I'm not. I'm just going to bridge this so that it stays as quads, because I don't want to mess that up. So bridge, grab this edge, pull it down, push it in a little bit, then you have this transition out from the head. Okay, so at this point, what we would want to do is turn whatever our head geometry is back on, and then with our ear, we can leave it at the correct rotation that we modeled here in the side view. But then in the front view, we want to maybe tilt it and start to match the size of how things look in our front view. Scale that up a little bit. Turn it a little bit. Cool. All right, so with our head turned on, what we want to do is start to move some of the points on the head around so that we can reattach this ear. But one thing before we do that is we want to extrude one last edge line, which is basically the entire outside edge here back until you get this part. And you don't want to have that selected, because what we're going to do is we will extrude and then scale in to get the back side of the ear. And then we can pull out a little bit and then just fix a couple of the points here when it connects back in, so that we maintain our quads. So with wireframe active, I'll get this vert kind of back in place so that I can see what's going on. Because right now it's hiding inside of the ear canal. Don't want that. Pull both of these down so you can see. And then go back to shaded view, pull this up. All right, and so let's see, what we can do is just start to weld things in place and see. No, that doesn't work. Make this to that. Yeah, there we go. So now this is turned into a quad and it ties directly into this point. And we've got several points here. If I do that, that. Now that's turned into a quad. So that's good too. All right, cool. And like I said, my ears have an earlobe. So this face is important because it is outside of the head. But if your earlobe directly stitches in, then you may have something more like that. Okay, so now that I have the back side of the ear with some verts, these are the vertices that are actually going to attach back into the head geometry. So what we can do is turn our head back on and then kind of push this opening and move the opening using just kind of soft selection and the move brush so that it will be easier to weld the verts in place. Let's see. Pull this over like that. In a little bit. Move this out of the way. Yeah. Pull that down. Okay. Turn soft selection off for a second. On, push it in a little bit. All right, cool. So I kind of have that opening in a reasonable place. Great. So with that in mind, what I'll do is actually just try and average some of the verts that are leading up to it. So I'll do that. Get rid of this. Go. Okay, and then once again, I'll go ahead and do the average vertices trick, and you can do that with edges or verts selected. So that just kind of relaxes them into place. And we can also use the old quad draw trick of doing soft selection and then relaxing. The other thing that you can do, and I was going to maybe cover this a little bit more in depth in another video, but we could start using some of these sculpting tools that Maya put in like 3 or 4 years ago. But the one that's pretty good is here. It's called the Smooth tool. And with that active, it kind of creates, I don't know, you can see the wireframe of your mesh. And then this brush is basically the area that you're going to affect it, and you adjust the brush size just how you do soft select, where you hold down B and then drag your mouse left and right. And so with the Smooth tool active, it actually does a little bit more gentle relaxing than the relax on the quad draw. It's because it's kind of more specifically designed for this operation versus quad draw, which is, you know, just kind of fakes what this is doing. All right, nice. So the other thing to keep in mind is when we're matching up points, it's not going to necessarily 100% 100% match. So you can see here we've got more verts on the head than we do in the ear. And that shouldn't be a problem because we can do the same kind of cutting up and using the multi-cut tool that we did for our hand. So for example, if I had a vert here and a vert there and a vert there, you can see that we're kind of missing these in-betweens. And so what we can do with the ear is come in with the multi-cut tool, click this edge, click in the middle of the quad, go across to the middle of the next quad, click in the middle of that, and then down in the middle of the edge. When you hit enter, then all you have to do is connect those back up to the corners. And what you end up with is this formation where now you have a quad here, 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 and here. And as a result, you have these two extra verts that you can just snap into place into the head. So basically that's what you're going to want to do, is walk or just go all the way around your head and match up as closely as you can. You don't really want to move the verts a whole lot, so you're not going to want to like snap this one all the way over here. You want to try and find your best fit. So this one probably would get attached here, and this one here, and so on and so forth as you go all the way around. And anytime that you're able to basically skip two edges, you can always go back and do this formation. Well, great. Maybe I'll do a speedy version of attaching the ear back to the head, and then we can move on from there. Okay, so I have my ears stitched back on, and in this final part of the video, you can see that at this point, the whole left, or I guess the whole right side of my head has been modeled, so I can duplicate it and just flip it over to the other side and stitch it back together. And then I have a really good base that I can start to subdivide and then really start to add good detail to it. So to make sure that this middle edge is totally aligned to the middle, I'll go over what I've covered in class a few times, which is using the component editor to zero out these verts. So right now I've got just this edge that if I look in the front view, it's along this zero line, or it's like aligned with the z-axis in the middle. So if I go up to Windows, General Editors, and then Component Editor, it brings up the component editor window, and the tab that I want to use is polygons. And under polygons, you've got vertex X, Y, and Z, and that's basically the location of each of the verts in 3D space. So right now you can see this the vertex X column. If it were in the middle, everything should be 0. And if I scroll up and down, I can see that there's actually several verts that aren't 0. So if I select the bottom, go to the top, and then shift select, it'll highlight all of them, and then I can just type 0, and it'll zero them all out. So now that everything is located directly in the middle, if I select my head, right now this is my pivot point is kind of over here to the left, probably because I'd centered it and it puts it in the middle of the mesh. But before I duplicate, what I want to do is clear my history, so it gets rid of all the stuff here. Zero, or freeze my transformations, which will zero out any extra stuff that's going on in the translate, rotate, and scale stuff. And then holding D and X, I'll drag on just the right control, and that'll center it right in the middle of the world. So now if I duplicate that head, this one's called head 10. This is now head 11 is the duplicated version, right? I can go into the scale X column and just type -1, and it'll be a flipped version of that head. So now if I select both of them and go to mesh, combine, then it becomes a single mesh. And then I want to clear history again, so it gets rid of any extra information. And then I want to make sure that all my vertexes along the center column are welded together. And a quick way to do that, because right now they're still separate, even though it's one mesh, what I want to do is I can basically just drag select everything and then go to Edit Mesh and then hit the little options box for Merge, and make sure that the threshold is turned way, way down. So basically only verts right on top of each other will be welded together. So this is type 0.001. And when you hit apply, it might not look like anything has happened, but if you select one of your center verts and drag it back and forth, you can see that now there's only one there. So if I were to come in and use like the quad draw tool, and if I press B to activate soft select, drag up the number, or drag it up so there's like a bigger area, and I start to relax it, you can see that everything is getting a little bit more distributed evenly along the middle. So don't go too crazy with this, because we don't have a lot of geometry holding the placement of everything, which can be a little dangerous for kind of deflating your head past the point that you would want it to. And then once you are here, the next steps are basically adding in more geometry so that you have more points to move around. And the quick and efficient way to do that is to just hit the smooth button. So if you hit that, see how it kind of basically subdivided everything. So now you have 4 times as much information that you can go in and start to edit. And why this is very helpful is I'll actually subdivide, I'll leave it here for now, but I'll switch this back to my transparent material and then go into my front view, and with these extra verts I can just use my quad draw tool and get a little bit better shape with things like the eye Oh, and actually before I do that, what I want to make sure to do is turn on symmetry, turn it along X, so that any changes I make to this side will be also made to that side. So can start to shift these around a little bit, get a little bit more organic shape to that instead of such a kind of hard 3D shape. Then even in the nose, get this kind of more aligned well. And then just in the perspective view, what I can do so that I don't have to keep switching back and forth for materials, I can use this button here, which basically sets everything to default material, which is Lambert 1. And if you haven't adjusted Lambert 1, it'll just be nice and it'll be just this flat gray. So with that turned on, I can come in and start to add in some of the volume to things like nostrils or the lips that I lost by doing the subdivision. And so some of the areas that I'll hit first is kind of the eyes, the edge of the nostrils, and then I'll make sure to push the middle of the mouth right back in like that. Let me flatten it out a little bit so that you still have the nice kind of lip transition like that. But basically at this point, you're just starting to kind of massage these points using either the Quadra tool, the Move brush or the Move tool with Soft Select activated, and try and get as far as you can with a shape with one subdivision, and then you can hit it again with a subdivision, and you'll end up with a lot more detail that you can get a much more accurate head. Okay, so at this point we're going to cut off the video, and please write down any questions that you had and bring them to class, and I can go over this technique more if you need some more help.